Folks, this is the third segment of our program, and we are right back with you. At this point, Dr. Preville will take the lead because he has a very important contribution to highlight. Dr. Preville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chasney. And again, the issue of finding this equity or this balance between taxation and economic growth and the need for the private sector to exist in order to provide more taxes. One of the things government has to understand is that if you really regress, if you go backwards far enough to see where the first tax dollar comes from, it's for the private sector. And every new tax dollar comes from the private sector, not the recycled tax dollars. The tax dollars already collected by government and paid to the public sector is really recycled tax dollars. New tax dollars comes from the private sector all the time. So it's in government's interest to ensure the private sector exists, especially as Mr. Chasney likes to put it, and I concur with him. If you think about government's role with the private sector, government automatically is a 33% shareholder in everybody's business. It gets 33% of the profits made by the business, but has not invested anything in the business. And so, if that is the case, doesn't it make logical sense that government nurtures the growth of the firm, which is actually the goose that will lay the golden eggs for government to reap? And this is something I think that has to be looked at very seriously. And in the discussions of tax reform, the point I want to drive home, and too often people miss the point. Talk about tax reform, people miss the point. Lowering the tax rate does not mean getting less tax revenue. If you lower the tax rate and you have more people paying, you actually get more revenue. Okay? If the tax rate is, for example, 7%, and you have 50,000 people paying on this, you will have more revenue than if it is 15% and you have, say, 10,000, 15,000 people paying. This is what people have to understand. So you expand the net of persons who can access the goods. But there is another side to it, you know. And this is the side of social justice. Because every time the tax rate is too high, it makes goods, certain goods, unavailable, inaccessible to some members of society. Is that social justice? They cannot consume because their dollars are limited. The dollars cannot stretch long enough, far enough to consume goods beyond a certain point. So social justice is also a major issue and distortion in social justice Claudius, as a result of high taxes.
Right, because you've heard it over and over here in St. Lucia when it came to medication. There are a lot of people who suffer from diabetes and high blood pressure and are just not able to buy the medication. Yes. That is social injustice.
That's right.
Because it boils down that if a man cannot afford something, it's all well and good to tell a man you can't afford a home.
Yes.
But when you're denying an individual the survival of his
medicine,
health,
yes.
Okay, the medicine, okay, the people, this is it's people to run a country.
That's right.
So, I mean, this is, now, but how does one really, you know, after all my years on earth, I'm asking a question. How does one really deal with a government to get that across them? Should there be some sort of an organization that can be put together that has some kind of teeth to say, look at me, this is the common sense, this is what needs to be done. You know, you take, for instance, the banking institution. Okay, to circumvent coming to a bank, what have they been doing? Raising bonds. At first, it was something new, many people. Today, they cannot sell those bonds. What does it tell you? People with the limited funds are not going to put money in a bond and put their money at risk. Now, as good as St. Kitts is with its manufacturing, they were the first to default.
That's right.
Right. People not only did not receive interest on their money, I saw letters were written to investors saying, we advise you now to take 50% your investment, because in a couple of days' time, or a couple of years' time, or a couple of months' time, you're going to get nothing.
Yeah.
What message are you sending to a man who has worked hard, trusted a government by taking bonds, and all of a sudden your finances are gone? I ask you to comment.
I think you're putting me in the hot seat.
Okay, fine. Then okay.
Thanks so much. I mean,
yeah.
You know, the reality is that yes, and the issue of bonds and haircuts really is a function of over leveraging across the region, and I guess over exuberance by the financial sector in encouraging that. So we take some blame for that.
You know, I'm going to assist your answer by telling you something that happened in St. Lucia. Look at the difference. Taking the point that Claudius made, you take the Heineken factory in St. Lucia, which has been in existence for over 20 years. For the first 8 years, no dividends were paid. For the last 15 years, 100% dividends are paid. Now, let us not, should I say, let us give government praise for what they have done. Various governments have given Heineken many concessions.
Yes.
Okay? As a result of that, it has turned profitable. They keep a good staff employed, and the people who invested get 100% on their dividends. 100%. I know a particular business person on the island who did very well some years ago and invested $600,000, and they get $50,000 a month in dividends for the last 10 to 12 years.
Wow.
Now imagine that. The National Development Corporation under Sir John Compton gave the land, the NDC land, for $1 million to them. And NDC has been getting $1 million a year in dividends for the last 12 years.
Wow.
So on $1 million investment of land, you have got back 12 million. And in addition to that, you have a prime company sending out the wrong stuff and producing the right products.
Yes.
And can anyone say tomorrow that they should not give Heineken any more concessions? If I were a prime minister, I would just howl those fellas and give them all the concessions so they can continue to do what they're doing.
Oh, I would find more Heinekens to give concessions.
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's understand what we mean by concessions. Because concessions are incentives provided to companies for them to make the appropriate investments so that they can be strong and they can compete.
That's right.
Right? It's not a giveaway.
Yeah.
It is, if I allow you this tax break, you will upgrade your plant. You will implement this measure. You will hire more
people,
or train or invest in training staff.
Yes.
And therefore down the road you will be more profitable. You will be a strong exporter, and you will be able to contribute both in terms of tax dollars and dividends, and do so sustainably. So, if I'm to use the Trinidad example, and I'm loath to do that, in the 70s we got it right there. You know, there were very appropriate concessions introduced. The manufacturing sector took advantage of those concessions, and ultimately the manufacturing sector grew into the strong entity that it is now. So I think there's a precedent that can be set.
Yeah.
But concessions are not giveaways. They're very, very specific interventions.
And if I may add, I think it's that's a good point, and the fact that you indicated that Heineken initially paid no dividends. In the first 8 years, the company was consolidating its base, ensuring it has a formidable infrastructure in place. Once that is in place, it is in a position to pay. And this is the thing. Now, we need to ensure that in reviewing any incentives regime in St. Lucia, as government revisits those regimes, we need to ensure that those who qualify for these incentives understand equally well that they will be expected to expand the business activity, the business volume, if you wish, so that more persons are employed, more taxes are paid eventually, and there's more economic growth. That should be the goal.
You know something, Claudius? When I was chairman of NDC, it happened under my watch, because NDC, Heineken's expanded, and you know, at the expense of Aruba. Aruba wouldn't give the concessions. They pulled out the equipment from Aruba and brought it to St. Lucia and expanded the factory. So you see, many governments have the feeling that why are we giving those greedy people concessions without understanding the importance that these same people that are termed greedy are the ones expanding the economy. Yeah. And as you rightly said, the more people you employ, the more taxes government get. Your NIS payments are increased, okay? And you send the right signal of confidence on an island.
That's right.
Yeah. So your point is well taken, you know? Gentlemen, I think we're due for another break, and we'll come back to our final segment. This is Open Mic. We'll be right back.